What if the sky opened over our world and rained acid, not for an hour, not for a week, but for nearly 2 million years? What if the oceans turned sour, forests hissed and melted, and the air itself became something you could taste, metallic, bitter, and deadly? Would anything in America survive a storm like that? Would anything, anywhere, survive at all? You're watching Rivo TV. Picture a planet with no familiar map. North America, South America, Africa, Europe, gone as separate ideas. Instead, there's one colossal landmass stretching horizon to horizon, a single stitched-together continent called Pangaea. The heart of that supercontinent is a furnace, sun like a blowtorch, wind like sandpaper. Days bake the ground until it splits and peels, nights radiate heat back to the sky. In the interior, rain is a rumor, water exists in mirages and memories. Life huddles along the coasts, thin green margins where rivers meet a warm, shallow sea. There, ferns nod in sluggish breezes. Horsetails crowd the banks. Insects, dragonflies with dinner plate wings, skim the water like living kites. And across those margins, the animals that matter aren't dinosaurs. Not yet. The real power belongs to crocodile-bodied monsters and armor-backed reptiles with heads like battering rams. Amphibians the size of alligators prowl creeks at dusk, their eyes 2 coins of molten copper in the dark. Dinosaurs here are understudies, quick-legged, sharp-eyed, small. They keep to the edges, a rustle, a blur, a set of 3-toed tracks stitched between boulders and reeds. When shadows move, they freeze. When giants walk, they give way. But Earth, underneath it all, is restless. Far below the roots of forests and the burrows of little bone chewers, deeper than the last light can ever reach, heat is gathering. The supercontinent creaks. Stone strains. Faults whisper. For ages, pressure rises like a held breath, and then the planet exhales. It begins with a shiver, a low animal groan of the ground. Water in clay bowls ripples. Flocks burst from the marsh as if a drumbeat struck the air. On the horizon, a line like a black stitch opens and becomes a wound. Fire spills out, not a mountain erupting, but the earth itself splitting, a seam unzipping. Lava doesn't just burst and stop, it flows in sheets, a red-black river that builds its own canyons, that makes new cliffs as it cools. Forests don't burn, they vanish. A lakeshore becomes a memory in an afternoon. But the true catastrophe is invisible at first. As the lava tsunamis steam and crackle, staggering volumes of gases spew into the sky, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and a haze of compounds the lungs were never meant to taste. The blue of the atmosphere grays out, first like smudged glass, then like a dirty blanket. The sun turns from a coin to a smear. Daylight has edges now, like dusk inside a dirty jar. The oceans take the first punch. They drink those gases in the way damage always starts, quietly, without spectacle. Acid strengthens. Shells that once sounded like a tap on porcelain begin to chalk and crumble. Reefs dim from neon to husk. The water's chemistry tilts past what delicate communities can handle. Entire food webs darken like a string of city lights going out, one neighborhood at a time. Then the sky changes again. The clouds thicken into low, bruised ceilings that drag their bellies over the land. Thunder pulses with a strange, metallic undertone. When those clouds finally break, the rain arrives as an insult. Each drop sizzles on leaves. Holes appear where water should heal. Tree bark blisters. Streams foam. The ground releases a sharp, sour breath. This is not rain that grows crops or feeds rivers. This is rain that etches bones. And it does not stop. Seasons flip by, and the storm becomes a way of life. Not a constant downpour, but a repeating curse, years of soot-choked skies and bitter rain, broken by intervals of searing heat when the haze thins and the sun comes back vengeful. Plants that can flee do so by seed, plants that can't are erased. Herbivores paw at soil that offers no comfort. Their ribs become ideas beneath their skin. Predators, once kings of rivers and swamps, outlive their food for a while, then follow it into silence. This is what an extinction sounds like, not with a bang, but with the wind moaning across a plain that used to support 10,000 lives, and now supports 10. But there are survivors. There almost always are. The miracle is that some of them are the small ones, the nervous ones who used to stand aside when giants drank. Among them are dinosaurs. Not colossal, not legendary, not yet. But tough. Their bodies run cool and efficient. Their lungs are like bellows threaded through with air sacs, able to pull oxygen out of ugly air. They don't need a banquet to keep moving, a pocketful of calories will do. Many aren't picky: seed, insect, carcass, leaf. The world is whatever's edible when you can't be proud. One dawn, in a landscape the rain has chewed thin, a small two-legged hunter, a thing no taller than a child, schemes along a river that used to be a lake. Its eyes flick as if they already know tomorrow. It darts between stones, pauses to scratch at the softened clay, and digs out something that only smells a little dead. It eats fast, turns twice, and vanishes into reeds that hiss like whispering paper. Above it, dramatically farther from the water, something great and armored has tried to migrate and failed. Spikes dull to the color of dry blood. The ground around it is stamped with the fading signatures of things that watched it lie down. That's one kind of future being written. And then, just as slowly as it began, the apocalypse blinks, first one eye, then the other. The seams continue to pulse and spill lava in waves, but the worst pulses slacken. The rain doesn't sweeten, but it visits less often. The sky, tentative as a wounded animal, shows a piece of itself, pale, weak, authentic. On a scraped hillside, a spray of green tries to be a fern. It manages a day, then two, then a week. Within a year there's a lacework of shade where there was none. Insects claim the air. The first frog makes a sound like a question. What happens after the end of the world is not silence. It's an argument about who belongs. And dinosaurs, newly lean, newly practiced at hunger, are convincing. The fossil record is a kind of ledger, and it shows this turn with a flourish. Before the catastrophe, dinosaur bones are rare and sidelined, footnotes beside the monstrous crocodile kin and the armored slabbacks that ran the show. After the catastrophe, the footnotes become chapters. Tracks multiply, three-toed prints in mud that set like pottery, trails of light bodies moving with a confidence their ancestors didn't have. Bones appear where there were none, and then in sizes that would have made their grandparents flinch. They don't just get bigger. They get more. Grazers with beaks for nipping tough plants spread like a rumor. Long-necked browsers that can lift heads into the treetops take the new forests as personal invitations. Predators lengthen into greyhounds of bone and tendon, with jaws hinged like traps. Every empty niche becomes an address, and dinosaurs change their shapes to match the doors. Meanwhile, in the dim hours when day heat bleeds out of the rock and the air becomes bearable for a heartbeat, another story unspools. Small bodies with fur, yes, fur, push their noses from burrow mouths and test the wind. They smell seeds, damp soil, and the curious electric scent of lightning far away. These are mammals, shy, clever, cautious, and they have plans that require patience measured not in years but in ages. Their eyes are large for seeing in the murk. Their ears map the world by sound. They eat what they can steal and what they can crack. When thunder rolls, they are already inside. The daylight, though, that belongs to dinosaurs now. Give them a few million years and they turn the planet into a parade. There are titans with necks like cranes that draw circles in the sky as they feed, their hearts pumping with the steady power of a freight train. There are armored tanks with tails that swing like flails. There are horned bruisers with head shields that stack like medieval walls. There are sharp-faced hunters who run not to chase but to arrive, whose teeth are polished by the work of every day. They become not an animal but an era. That reign lasts longer than the distance between the invention of writing and the phone in your hand, longer than the time that separates pyramids from skyscrapers. 166 million years is not a number you store, it's a weather pattern. And during it, the planet continues its churn. Continents that once clung together ease apart. New oceans wedge in. Coasts redraw themselves with each slow heartbeat of the mantle. Volcanoes still speak, but now in different dialects. The climate throws hot and cool back and forth like a ball passing between seasons that last generations. Through it all, dinosaurs persist. They fail sometimes, local crises, bad decades, unlucky volcanic hiccups, but they fail and return, adapting in place. The small ones stay fast and clever. The giants become living landscapes, migrating meadows carrying ecosystems on their backs. Every dawn writes the same thesis in a new way: you survive because you change. But the story under the edges, the mammal story, is learning that lesson too. Being small teaches them how to be many. Being hunted teaches them how to plan. Burrows become neighborhoods, neighborhoods become dynasties you can't see until you look with the right eyes. Their young arrive hungry and uncoordinated, which means parents learn to care, which means brains learn to grow, which means this quiet lineage invests in the future like it's a savings account that will someday buy the world. Now press pause. Step out of the prehistoric light and into ours. Our oceans are again warmer than they should be. Our reefs, those same delicate architectures that first collapsed when the ancient skies soured, are bleaching like bone. We're tipping the chemistry of the air in ways that register on instruments, yes, but also in the way summers feel on your skin, in the way storms change their minds and stall over cities as if choosing where to write their names. We are adding carbon to the sky at a pace the planet has not practiced. We're doing in centuries what ancient volcanoes took thousands of years to accomplish. The comparison is not perfect, history never is. But the rhyme is close enough to make the hair rise on your arms. Back in the Triassic twilight, the Earth didn't have a choice. Heat rose from below because that's what planets do as they shed their inner fire and rearrange their skins. Gases poured into the sky because seams opened and magma found daylight. The acid rains fell because chemistry followed rules there's no appealing. But now we have a choice. We are the first species to understand the machine we're sitting inside. We know which levers to stop pulling. We can count the parts per million with a precision a dinosaur would have called magic. And if the lesson carved into stone by the end of the Triassic means anything, it's this: the world will be fine in the long run. It has time, unimaginable, indifferent time. What's at risk is not the planet's survival, it's ours, and the comfort of our children, and the music of the ecosystems we inherited. The Earth rewards adaptability. It always has. The dinosaurs inherited a kingdom not because they were fated to, but because they were ready when the curtain dropped on the old order. So what does it mean for us to be ready? Maybe it means we learn to love limits the way sailors love maps, not as fences, but as tools. Maybe it means our cities learn to breathe like forests, shaded, cooled, laced with green. Maybe it means our energy stops needing to dig up yesterday's sunlight and starts catching today's. Maybe it means we stop thinking of survival as a competition and start thinking of it as choreography, a complicated dance with soil and water and the unglamorous miracle of insects. Return now, for a moment, to that small dinosaur on the riverbank, the one that plucked a meal from the mud and lived to duck into the reeds. That animal didn't win by being terrifying. It won by being prepared to accept a world that kept changing the rules. It ate what was there. It kept moving. It didn't waste a dawn. And when the skies finally brightened, when the planet's fever broke, when the acid softened and the clouds remembered how to bring water that smelled like rain, those descendants walked out into a vacancy and filled it with splendor. We gave them names later: Thunder Lizard, Tyrant Lizard, Swift Thief, Armored Guardian. But under all the poetry was a simple truth. They were the right answers to a very hard test. We have our own test now. It is not graded on a curve. Listen, the rocks are not warning us in whispers. They are standing at the edges of deserts, in layers you can touch with your palm, telling their version of the story. This is how quickly it can go bad, they say. This is how long it can stay bad. This is what resilience looks like when it's not optional. This is how the survivors behaved. If you're waiting for certainty, for unanimous consent from the universe, it will not arrive. It never has. What arrives are choices, and the habit of making them. The habit of choosing less waste over more, cooler rooms over hotter ones, quieter machines over louder ones. The habit of noticing your watershed, of knowing where your electricity wakes up in the morning, of accepting that far away is a fairy tale we invented to hide the string between our lives and someone else's weather. There's a line we love in stories: no one saw it coming. It lets characters off the hook. It lets the audience go home without changing the way they drive. The dinosaurs didn't see it coming, they didn't have satellites and ice cores and graphs. But we do. We can see the next chapter sketched faintly in the margins. We can also cross it out and write a better one. So here's the final wide shot: a planet that has been, at different times, a ball of fire, a snowball, a swamp, a desert, a pinball machine of continents that won't sit still. Creatures rise and creatures fall, and the only guarantee is that nothing keeps the crown forever. The dinosaurs had their throne because they were ready when it fell into the street. Mammals rehearsed for millions of years in the dark, and then, one day, the lights went up. We inherited a stage built by catastrophe and patience. And we are still building. With every law and habit and invention and kindness, we are laying down rock that will someday tell someone else what mattered to us. Maybe they'll be people. Maybe they won't. But the record will be there, 100 feet below some future hillside, where a curious mind with a hammer and a backpack will chip away, brush dust from a layer, and say, here. Here is where they finally understood. Here is where they chose. If you felt small listening to this story, good. Small is honest. Small is the right scale for an animal standing on a planet that has been practicing geology longer than our species has been practicing language. But small things make weather. Small things steer rivers. Small things, shelter built tighter, food wasted less, engines cleaned up, forests let alone, add up the way raindrops add up, either to nourish or to ruin. So we end where we began, with the sky. If it opened and poured poison for 2 million years, some would still survive. The ones that did would do it by being nimble, unproud, patient, and relentless. We do not have to wait for that sky. We can be those things now, under a sun that still shines through blue most days, on a world that is still shockingly generous to the animal that learned to tell stories about it. This is Rivo TV. If this journey across deep time moved you, carry it forward, into a choice, into a habit, into a conversation with someone who still thinks rocks are quiet. Thank you for watching, for thinking, for giving the future a better page to read. Stay curious, stay kind, and we'll meet you in the next chapter.